Hi everyone, it's Sean from Pulse Markets here today, back in Sydney with Justyn Peters from NeuRizer. How are you going, Justyn?
It's good, thanks, Sean. I noticed the slight stagger there before you got to the new name. I think that's pretty natural. I think we're all doing it. We've been working with one name for 7 years and now we're up with the new one, but really good and a great week last week. So I was glad you were actually able to come over and actually see it firsthand.
I don't think, thank you for inviting me, but I don't think anyone can really feel from my words the excitement I saw from watching not only the ministers be so supportive of all the jobs you're going to create, and they're very supportive of the project, obviously speaking, we'll get to that later, but also Daelim giving a very passionate speech, the CEO, how supportive he is as a partner, but all the urea traders in the room, it was the who's who of the urea market, and they were all looking at each other because I obviously work the crowd at the end of it doing what I do for a living. And I've just never been so excited. There was an open bar next to me, 5 meters away, and I just did not touch it. I was too captivated by the speeches. It was an event for you going on the world stage of urea production. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, look, we were pretty happy with it, and it was an important event for us because we've had a long path. Some of the people have been with us for that 7 years. Some have only been for a few years. And we started out as an energy company with obviously a location name being Leigh Creek Energy. And we had that name obviously because of where it was, but also we were going to be producing syngas and then gas, and then we had a choice of product from there. And what's evolved over the years was we were clearly moving into the ammonia urea market. And because that was very clear and we'd made that decision and we'd moved with Daelim, which I'll come to a bit later on in this, it became clear to us it was time for a name change. So we had a really careful look at what to do here. And it was interesting. One of our directors up in China was actually initially anti the name change at all because of all the work he'd been doing up in China with the SOEs and the big companies with the name of Leigh Creek Energy. And he was actually quite concerned that the change in the name might dilute the influence and the access we've had in China. That's proved not to be the case, and it was the right decision. So, we engaged a firm to have a look at how we move forward, how we take our name to the right place, how we have something that's going to set us up for the next 20 or 30 years. And we came up with the name NeuRizer. And NeuRizer, I'm actually quite proud of when you look at what it means, because it's a multi-layered title, and that is, it starts with an N, right? And urea is a nitrogen product. So we start with that capital N, then it's N, and we have that name Neu, N-E-U. And Neu sits there for a few reasons. One of them is it's carbon neutral, so you get that into the name. Another part of it, new means a new way of doing things and going forward. And anyone who's seen our video will see that it's a very strong point within that. And then finally, you get to the riser, which has, several meanings, but one of them is when you use fertilizer, your wheat, your barley rises, it grows, but also rhymes with fertilizer. So we had that multi-layered use of this name. And then when the guys who were talking to us about this new name showed us the new logos, the way it looked in the green, it just resonated as the right decision for us. And we were really happy to be able to get ahead, get onto the market, do the announcement, do the opening and the launching, have the people we could have there, was really great.
Yeah, I really like it. I think the market's accepted it nicely as well. You can see that reflected in the share price. Now, we were talking about the launch. Can you just let us know who was there in South Australia last Thursday, where they actually came from?
Yeah, look, it was an interesting thing for us because you go through this process of deciding who you need there, who you're going to invite there, who you're going to leave out. And that was a difficult one. And one of the things we had a big major difficulty was that it was like herding cats. And the reason it was like herding cats is you think about the people who were there. We had 2 South Australian government ministers who had just been sworn in, who were part of cabinet in South Australia there. We had quite a few people who were heads of departments within South Australian government there as well, and a lot of senior bureaucrats. We didn't have, even though we had some phone hookups with the people that were down that week, any federal ministers there, but unfortunately, the timing of our relaunch coincided with budget week. So you had all the politicians in Canberra for that budget week, but we had two ministers, one the Minister for Primary Industries, Claire Scriven, and we had Jeff Brock, who's our local member for up in our area. And they were both there. And one of the reasons it was important to have them there was to show our other partners who came to it that we had that government support. So who else was there besides the government ministers? Clearly, Mr. Ma, who's the global CEO of Daelim, and his vice president was there. So we had the CEO and vice president had flown out from South Korea to Australia for 3 days, not for 15 minutes, but for 3 days to spend their time with us working through the carbon capture process and the agreement we were signing with them, working through the offtake and where we're going on that. And so you had him, and also speaking at the opening, which was actually extremely powerful. We had, I can tell you, Samsung were present. We had Koch brothers, we had KBR. And yesterday we just announced the licensing agreement with KBR that Daelim and KBR have gone into to provide us the technology and licensing for the ammonia process. And we will have an announcement fairly soon, hopefully, on our urea licensing process. So we will have those three components. Daelim is the EPC. We've now got KBR, and we'll have another party, which I can't announce publicly until we get across the line on the agreements. We had urea traders there, right? We had the largest manufacturer of urea in Southeast Asia was present. Not one of them, but 7 of their people were there at this particular meeting. They were here for 3 or 4 days, right? Did a site visit to have a look at what we're doing, met with the government. So things had moved very, very nicely there at this. So as I said, it was like herding cats. And one of the things was you had to get your timelines right, so you could get them all in one place at one time. And it meant that we couldn't invite as many shareholders as we wanted. So what we'll be doing is putting a video up of the process up there. I suggest, if people were worried about food and drink, they probably get themselves a beer and sit down and watch it and have the same experience we did. But it was, as I said, it was just a great, great day for us, important. And I think one of the most important things about the fact that Mr. Ma from Daelim was there was that if you read the speech, which we put up on the CCUS announcement a couple of days ago, if you read his speech, he makes it very clear on 3 or 4 occasions that we're partners, that we're not just contractors, we're partners with him and his company. And he referred to that in different ways. One of them was the offtake agreement. They're working through that. One of the other areas he talked about was that the BFS and the feed is progressing well, right? And we're working with them on that. So we had the offtake, the BFS, the feed. We've just signed that agreement for carbon capture, which is something they already do in South Korea. And as a company, we've said we've tried to have that solution for CO2. And it was important for us when we could work with Daelim that we had a company that's already doing that. It's not that they're telling people that they might do it or they've got to do research on it. They are already doing carbon capture in South Korea. And I think if you read his speech, he talks about the fact that there's a negative CO2 component to that. And he talks about bioenergy and biofuel. And what that is that in the process of producing that energy, it actually does consume CO2 as well. And that's where you get this concept of capturing the carbon, actually using energy that uses less CO2 and actually uses some of that up. You end up with a negative sum result. Something that we're working on, had a look at it, and it was interesting. We started talking about this when we very first signed that agreement for the offtake agreement last year. And we were aware of the carbon capture process. We were aware of where they wanted. And it's taken us that period of time to get to a point where last week we could sign an agreement. And the reason for that is quite simple. This is a very large company, and they are a very conservative company. And they take a lot of care to find out who they're working with. It takes a while to have a level of trust. Mr. Ma and I, I'm pleased to say, do have that level of trust. And that meant we could start moving forward on a whole range of other issues as well. So, the importance of Daelim, the importance of that meeting, the importance of that launch was huge for us.
Yeah, it was evident being in the room. It was just a pleasure. I mean, you're focused on Daelim there, but the South Australian government, the support you had there with these new ministers, how long have you been dealing with them? Because they're critical to the project as well.
Oh, look, extremely important. I've had some quotes before in some of the webinars we've done, Sean, where, you know, you're always in danger if the success of your business relies on government, right? There's always that level of risk you to get your change. So one of the things that we looked at, remember, was that when we started this, that's 3 governments ago. So South Australian government has fixed terms elections. They are 4-year terms. We started at Leigh Creek with the Labor government in power. And luckily, the minister for our area was the Mr. Tom Tonne. We then had a Liberal government for 4 years, worked closely with them and progressed with them and got our approvals as well. We just had a new election where the Labor government have been reinstated back in again, and Tom Tonne is the minister again. So we've had a long relationship with his department, and he is the minister. And we're very comfortable with the fact that he makes decisions based on science, and he makes the right decisions. So we've been lucky that we've worked with 3 different governments, and we've had cooperation and assistance from all 3 of them. And because they're both sides of the political spectrum, you can almost say you have that bipartisan support with them on our project.
That's really good to hear. So, I mean, that has been a question investors have been asking me with the change. Has it affected you? And you've just explained that perfectly.
Yeah.
We also had, as you said you would, the BFS, the initial BFS come out. And I know we can't see the figures because we can't see all your intellectual property, and you don't want to give it away for free to the likes of Strike or Peterman, for example. But can you let us know, firstly, I mean, is it commercial, and why is it so important?
Well, it's definitely commercial. There's no question about that. Look, it's an interesting question, Sean, and I think it's one that's worth exploring properly and explaining what happened last week, because there was a lot of flack at the end of last week over what actually had happened and a lot of misunderstanding about the process and where we were going with it. You know, I take responsibility for some of that, and that I might not have explained it clearly enough or made it clear what we were doing. We announced in August last year that we were going to do a BFS. We were going to do it in basically a 3-stage process. We're going to do an initial BFS, which would be completed and out by the first quarter, which was last week. That then the feed, the final engineering, process, front-end engineering with Daelim, and now with KBR, who've just been appointed, and the Urea one soon to be appointed. That information, the feed, goes into the BFS, right? So you're getting things like exactly what vessels are being used in the manufacturing process. It doesn't just come off the shelf. You have to actually have drilling, so you know up at site what your footing's going to be like, what extensive footings there are. Ambient temperatures actually impact quite dramatically on the engineering requirements, and then that dramatically impacts on the actual BFS on the IRR. You then have another situation within that where once that initial BFS is published, once that is actually finished and handed to us, we've got something we can set in front of the funders. And then once you get that funding sorted out, that feeds into the BFS, the final BFS as well, because as you would be aware, one of those components and one of those assumptions that goes into it is the cost of capital, right? So you have to have that pretty clear rather than just make an assumption of what it's going to be, and also the discount rate. So those sorts of things impact on their IRR quite dramatically. You don't get that level of detail and clarity until the feed is done. So that was what we were going to do. The initial BFS, then do the feed, put the information we got from the feed back into the BFS and have that finished so we could go to the board for a final investment decision. So we got that last week. You're right, there is a lot of IP in there, by the way. And so it's not a small document. It's well over 200 pages already. There were some accusations it might be a BFS light and didn't have the information we needed, which was incorrect. But what we wanted to do was be able to go to the market with those numbers, the assumptions, right? So we prepared our ASX release that had those numbers, had the assumptions, had the interest rate, the discount rate, your startup period over 3 years. It had all the assumptions we believed was necessary to go to market. And we gave that to the ASX. And we had no idea what was coming. and one of the criticisms we had last week on Friday from a few angry shareholders and people was, oh, you should have been on top of it. You should have known where they were going to object. Well, unfortunately, there's no definition of a BFS. There is no definition of a pre-feasibility study. There is no definition of a feasibility study. So you're left sort of in limbo about where you're at. So we put it in, and the response back to the ASX was that they didn't want us to announce the detail. It was material that the initial BFS had been finished, but they didn't want us to announce the detail because in their view, until the final BFS was finished, it would be premature to release those numbers because they were going to change. Now, some people come back and say, why do you just call it a BFS in the first place and then just amend it later, right? And in hindsight, there's some truth in that, but we didn't realize we'd run into this issue. Others said, why do you just call it a feasibility study and not a BFS, and then you could have gotten through? Ultimately, it makes no difference. Ultimately, it makes absolutely no difference for us in the project. It makes a little bit of difference about what we can disclose, but we're working hard on being able to disclose the majority of the numbers and information we've got, but it has to be in a legal way. We don't want to run foul of the ASX or ASIC. So one of those issues that you talk about on disclosures is the level of accuracy. It's the level of comfort, that you have in the numbers being right. And are they based on reasonable assumptions, which we do believe they are. So we believe, therefore, we should be able to get them out to the market. But we're just working with the regulator on that.
Okay, excellent. So it just takes time, obviously.
And if Sean, if you look at Mr. Ma's comments, even in his speech, he says that the feed and the BFS are progressing well. Right, so it's not us standing up and reassuring the market again. It's the head of the group doing the BFS. So we're comfortable and confident where it's going.
So in terms of timing with the BFS, you're still comfortable towards the end of the year, towards the end of the last quarter, we'll have this information?
Oh, look, now that KBR has been appointed, that will speed it up because it means that Daelim can rely on their expertise in engineering and their costings and that. So I think that'll speed it up. We get the ammonia one sorted out fairly quickly. The urea one sorted out very quickly. Then I'm pretty comfortable we'll get it all done easily within this calendar year.
Okay, fantastic. That obviously, with that feed, you've got to do a lot of drilling, and I'm assuming that relates to stage one, progressing.
Yeah, but also with that BFS, I mean, I'll give you an example of the information you need. South Australia is in an earthquake zone. Anyone who's been in Adelaide in the last 6 months knows we've had a couple of earthquakes. It is an earthquake zone. So one of the things you've got to do is when we're drilling up at site, we're drilling where the plant's going to be. Right, so you've got big, heavy equipment going in on a cement pad up there. You've got to know exactly what the soil types are like. You've got to know what the water is like in the ground. You've got to know the soil type so you can actually construct the pad that's earthquake proof, right? And that can have a major impact on the costings, right? So the drilling, yep, we've got to be up there drilling, and we've got to be drilling in two different types. One of those drilling is the drilling to give us the information for the actual area we're putting the ammonia and urea plant on. The other drilling we're doing is to do with the actual stage one panels, right? Gasifier panels, and for the monitoring around that. So there's two different levels of drilling, but we'll be drilling this month. We're in April.
That's really good to hear. With the Offtake, I know that's something that's really on everyone's lips. Everyone talks to me about it every day. And I know it's just a tool you use to get the finance, and it shows a lot of the fund managers that it is becoming a real event. I've spoke to quite a few different funds recently, and the mandates for a lot of funds just let investors know, don't let them invest in companies unless there's actual revenue, which can be in the form of an offtake. Yeah. So I also see it changing for NeuRizer. I got it out then. That the level of investor that could potentially come in once you've signed this offtake, we may actually change the register when this happens. So it's really exciting for me to see that as an investor personally, that we may get this register forming up a lot better than what we've had, and that share price starts staying up when we get these good announcements. So what's the timing on that? I know Daelim were there last week. Will they be coming back soon? Or?
Yeah, so the offtake the offtake situation is really quite interesting. And that is that traditionally, if you're in iron ore, you're in coal, you're in gas, you had to have an offtake there to guarantee that you had your revenue stream, so that when you put down a high capex project, you had the revenue coming in that gave your return. And so that meant the investors were comfortable. If you're into debt, the banks were comfortable that you could service that debt. And if you have a look at an example of that's quite interesting, is that the LNG projects at Gladstone are a classic example of this, is that nearly all of those had to go and get long-term take or pay gas contracts to be able to secure the funding to be able to build those plants. And as it turns out, it was fine at the front end, but ends up being terrible a few years later, right? Because what ends up happening is that the gas prices go silly, but they've had to have long-term contracts locked in, which will do have a bit of flexibility for the pricing to go up, but normally have a cap and collar. And you find that those companies are selling their gas cheaper than they would if they could actually go on market now. If I was mining gold and pulling gold out of the ground and there was the reserve there of gold, you knew it was there. Do you think the market would care whether you had an offtake agreement or not on your gold? You could sell gold anywhere on the market. Right now, the same thing applies to urea. Okay. Now, that's not an excuse. That's not a reason for not doing it. We still have to do the offtake agreements because of the size of our company. And that is that we need that guaranteed revenue stream before you
keep the financiers happy.
So you need that. Okay. So Daelim have made it clear they want to take half of it. Right. In Mr. Ma's speech, again, he was talking about the port infrastructure, their logistical experts, and how they can move it around the world. So they were looking at that. So Daelim want to take their half offshore. That leaves us, roughly 500,000 tonne of urea that we can sell within Australia. So we're currently negotiating with a second party and a third party on the balance of urea that's sitting there, of which we want to allocate as much as possible of that to domestic. But what we also have said is that if we can get the offtake for that 4 million tonne secured, and once we get it up and running, that is the plant up and running and manufacturing urea, then we'll be looking at that expansion of the extra 1 million tonne, which gives us even more capacity here. But unfortunately, a company like us absolutely want to have as much of that urea into the Australian market. I mean, I'm sure that we could probably get all of it into the South Australian market and it would be taken up. But so it's a long way of answering that question on it. Now, where are we at in that process? I would say that, well, certainly the Daelim one, it's clearly well on track. We signed the heads of agreement with Daelim to finish in June. We're very comfortable. We're well in front of that and having that offtake with them signed before the end of June. We're well in front of that. And you think about it, we're in April, so we're only talking, a matter of 4 to 8 weeks, and we should be there on that. These things are expensive. The contracts, they're complicated. There's a lot of work involved in them. And another part of that is someone like Daelim needs to be able to have seen the interim BFS to know about the viability, to know whether it's worth investing in, putting the effort into an offtake agreement. And I think the fact that, that Mr. Ma's group is doing, that BFS work, he knows what the numbers are. There was no hesitation in him about being a partner with us, about him doing the offtake. The second one, that's the other offtake outside of the Daelim one. We've been negotiating almost daily now for the last few weeks, getting very, very close. But once again, a big company and a slow company, and that's because they're cautious. And we're working through that. There's a lot of legal work to do on that one as well. There's take or pay components within it. So we're nearly there, and I think we'll have that one done before the end of this financial year. So we should have 2 full offtake agreements by June this year.
That's excellent. That's really good. And obviously, the offtakes we're just talking about, that leads to funding. You made an announcement recently which mentioned PricewaterhouseCoopers, which they're obviously not your run-of-the-mill accounting firm. They're sort of the top echelon. They're in the top 4, realistically, in Australia.
Yeah.
Why have we selected them?
Look, that's a good question. I mean, some people have said to us, look, if you've got your 70% through Daelim's banking group, if the BFS stands up and we can come to satisfactory commercial terms, why are you appointing someone like PwC? And I think it's for a whole range of reasons. I think firstly, it's for our shareholders. So our shareholders know we've actually engaged someone who knows what they're doing in this field, so that we're just not relying on board making decisions without adequate advice in the background. I think, and you're starting to see that now with our company. We've got Ernst & Young, who are our auditors. We're doing the EPC with Daelim. We've got KBR, one of the biggest companies in the world, doing it for ammonia. We are now playing with the big boys, right? We're talking big amounts of money. So we needed a first tier auditing group there. If you have a look at PwC, we need advice. We're not experts in this field. We can do certain things, but our board is going to need to be comfortable that whichever decisions we make, we've explored the alternatives, and that's what their role is. We have a good relationship with PwC. We've worked with them on numerous projects in the past, and we're very comfortable with them. But it'll be let's see how we all go on this, guys. Let's see what you put in front of us.
So what you've just said, actually, I think this is quite important. Justyn Peters, Phil Stavely, Christian, the team at Leigh Creek, you're not afraid to ask for help for the top professions or the top of the field in each sector you're looking at. It's very clean to see.
You'd be a fool if you didn't go down that path. This project's a couple of $2 billion. We've never built an ammonia plant. We've never built a urea plant. We're not an EPC group. People came to us and said, oh, you don't have the ability within the company to actually build this. How are you going to do it? Well, we've shown that. We don't have the knowledge on an ammonia plant, but KBR does. We don't have it on urea, but the company we're working with at the moment does. The experts in finance are not us, right? So we go to them. Unfortunately, it can be expensive doing that too, I might add, because if you're going to the best out there, it's not a cheap process. But we're lucky. A lot of them have worked on, because of our size, working on the basis of a long-term future with us. So they see huge upside in working with us. Yeah.
So it's a long-term goal.
Been really good. Yep.
Yeah. I guess you've answered the question about stage one, which I think everyone's wanting to know. You're drilling in April.
Yeah.
When do you think you'll be turning power on for that 5 megawatts?
As long as we don't sell the power to someone else, I think it'll be fairly soon. And what I mean by that is we've actually had people coming to us and offering us more than we paid for these generators we built just to buy them straight off us. We're not going to fall for the temptation. We need them here.
Yeah.
But, so we're expecting them here next month. I'd have to ask Christian for the exact date. Logistics are always a problem at the moment. Shipping is a lot slower than used to be.
They said they were in Spain last week when I spoke to your team, and they were getting on a ship and they'd be here soon. They're very confident that they'd arranged the logistics and they were on the way.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you'll see that we, in one of the announcements, we had a lot of the photos. I can't remember, it was in a quarter actually in one of the announcements, but we had a lot of photos of the actual generators. They're in containers. It's really easy to put them on a ship, put them on a truck up to Leigh Creek and plug them in. So we're pretty excited about that. It's interesting. It's opened up, going this process, has opened up some other commercial options with this particular type of equipment that we're exploring as well. Most of the piping is available now, but there'll be a little, depends on a couple of things there, because we're going down that CO2 path. We've had to have a look at the quality of the piping we're using, because CO2 is actually quite a corrosive gas. So we've had to up specs on a few of those things, but most of it is here now. Most of it's available. The drilling, I said, has been mobilized. I was talking to the owner of the drilling company only last week, and he said he's so busy at the moment that he can't scratch himself. So we're lucky that we've actually been able to get our hands on the rigs from him.
Yeah.
And he was at our opening last Thursday.
No, that's excellent, Justyn. Do you have any final comments that you'd like to get out while you've got the opportunity?
Yeah, look, I think I do have, and I'd written it down before, but I don't really refer to my notes that much when we speak. Unfortunately, it's because I've lived every minute of this for the last 7 or 8 years, so it's pretty indelibly printed. But
yeah,
I just think that this is an opportunity for me to plug the company, right? And what I want to be able to say is that I think what we've achieved from a small company to where we are and to where we're going is extraordinary. And the reason for that is it's not about what we say we're going to do. It's about what we actually have done. And I wanted to give you just a list of, I think, of major milestones. I don't mean just every little approval or every little thing we've done as a company, but major milestones. Well, the first one is that we said we're going to do the demonstration facility. We've got the approvals to do that, and we did it, and it's successful. The second one was we said we get a petroleum production license, something that a lot of people were skeptical about at the start. We've got that. We got the Section 23 approval from the government in December last year, which gave us a streamlined process of working with traditional owners, was something that was very important for us to be able to get. We got our EPC with Daelim, with a major company, not a secondary or a third tier company, but a first tier company with that 70% funding ability within that particular agreement. We've just had our license through Daelim sorted out with KBR to provide us their expertise in engineering. We're about to have another one on Urea. That'll be only a week or so away. We've got our first offtake agreement progressing really well with Daelim. Publicly out there, we've said it. It's been reaffirmed by the CEO. We've nearly got that one finished as well. Then we've got our second offtake agreement we're in negotiations with. We'll have that one finished before the end of this financial year. And one of the big ones that we've seen some sort of exciting movements on is that strategic partner we talked about once before. And I think that that's moving along. And I think we're lucky that, the world's in a place at the moment where it's becoming very clear that urea is a major issue, that ammonia is an issue. And I'm comfortable that we'll get that strategic partnership worked out fairly soon. But it's not absolutely necessary. We get the two offtakes, it won't be as crucial. But it'll be a nice place to be to have two offtakes and a strategic partner who comes into the company. That'd be a lovely one for us. And then I think the CO2 certification was a major one. I think that lots of companies run around saying it's important. Lots of companies think it's important and don't come up with the results. I think we're lucky. We've been audited. We've come up with those results. We've worked hard at it. The fact that we've signed with Daelim for carbon capture shows that we're serious. It shows that Daelim is serious, and it shows that Daelim is comfortable and confident that they can actually do that with us. So I think for a company our size over the period of time, I just think those achievements are amazing. And I look forward to completing those last three that are there very, very soon. And then I can sit there in front of my shareholders. I can sit there in front of fund managers saying, these are the 10 milestones we said we're going to do, and all 10 are completed.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll say congratulations to the first 7. I'm very confident you'll get there on the last 3. I'm contemplating with the wife now buying more shares. We're already tapped out significantly, as you know. You can see my holdings, a computer share. But I just want to say thanks, Justyn. It was very rewarding traveling down to Adelaide, having a look at what was in the room myself. I mean, we do a lot of research when we're investing, and I've known you for many years, and just seeing everyone there, it just blew me away. Like the traders, the government. I mean, I even met the team from the ports. They were there I had a chat with them. It was just your lobbying group, your marketing team, and your staff, like having a beer with them in the afternoon after it all. They're just so supportive and just so happy to be part of the company, which I think there were 50 of them or 40 of them. I can't remember how many.
Yeah,
but they all really love what you're doing, and they're really proud to be part of the company. So it was a really good day.
Thanks for that, Sean. I think one of the things that I like about that, not only, it's a networking opportunity, you get everyone to get to meet each other, but what I like about it is that I get other people to see what's really happening and reaffirm that, rather than me stand up and just keep saying it. They get to see it firsthand, and that's a powerful, strong story.
I think you do need to get people to look at that video when you get it up there.
Yeah.
I'll provide a link to it because it'll probably be there by the time we've edited this and sent it out, because we've got to get it through compliance at our end to make sure that it's okay with ASIC.
Yeah.
But by the time that happens, we'll hopefully have that link there so people can actually see what I saw.
We're definitely putting it up so everyone can see it. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Justyn. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thanks for that, Sean. Appreciate it. And catch up soon. See you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Bye.